A couple of days ago, a student that I work with brought to my attention a problem that she has. Even though she has made a list of her priorities for what she wants to work on for that day, she finds herself working on something else instead. And I tried to get to the bottom of this. I asked her, why do you wander around rather than staying on task? And what I realized is that her lack of focus was due primarily to two things: information overload, due to a constant stream of internet content that's competing for her attention every single minute, and anxiety, the worry of not being able to get a job. And in this video, I'm going to tackle both of these problems and more. One of my clients has once said, Toby can shoot lasers out of his brain by just focusing his mind. And I'm going to share with you the secret that makes me good at my job. And that secret is really just summed up in one word: flow. The term flow is based on the book Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And the author of this book is a psychology researcher who focuses his research on happiness. And in one of his studies, he put beepers on a large number of people. These people would carry around the beepers with them throughout their normal lives. And the beepers would start beeping at random times. And when they do, these people have to answer a series of questions that basically surveys their state of mind at that precise moment. And in this way, they were able to collect tens of thousands of responses. And what they have learned by sifting through all of these responses was that people are at their happiest not when they're at leisure, but rather when they're concentrating. So flow is a state of mind where you're putting all of your attention into working on a specific task. And Michael Jordan has a word for this. He calls this being in the zone. When Michael Jordan is in the zone, his shooting is so good that to him, the basket that he is shooting the ball at appears to be huge. When you're in flow, it's sort of like your brain is acting like a filter for all of the sensory input that you're receiving from the environment. And you're able to only pay attention to the things that are relevant to the task at hand, while blocking out everything else that is irrelevant. And sometimes something strange happens to your perception of time. Sometimes you feel like time is standing still, while other times time just flies. Flow is people's happiest state. But it turns out that flow is also people's most productive state. And when you're in flow, that is the time when you can learn the fastest. In order to achieve flow, the conditions have to be just right. 1, you have to have a clear goal that you're working towards. 2, there's nothing to distract you from working on that task. 3, the difficulty level of the task you're working on has to hit a sweet spot. It has to be difficult enough that you have to put forth mental effort in order to do it. But it can't be so hard that you feel overwhelmed and discouraged. And out of those 3 things, number 2 and 3 are the most tricky to get right. For this episode, I'm only going to focus on number 2. And perhaps in a future episode, I will also cover number 3. So how do we eliminate distractions? Well, let's divide and conquer. There are 2 distinct types of distractions. External distractions, which come from our surrounding environment, and internal distraction, which come from within us. Let's start with external distractions. This is your phone ringing, your email notifications, your Twitter, Facebook notifications, Slack notifications, and any other kind of app that wants to send you notifications. It is also somebody talking to you, or just noisy people chatting amongst themselves. It is music playing, it is babies crying, it is any kind of noise that is distracting you. So here are some tips on how to eliminate or reduce these kinds of distractions. Number 1, turn off your notifications. Just turn them off. Email, Facebook, Twitter, Slack, whatever, just turn them off. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how can I survive without my notifications? Well, we were doing fine before the iPhone and the Android came out. I actually have a friend and former coworker who still does not own a cell phone. That's right. He uses landline phones. And ironically, this guy develops Android apps. So clearly, it can be done. Here's what I'll suggest. Just turn off your notifications across the board for 1 week, whether it is desktop notifications or whether it is notifications on your phone. Try it out and see whether it fits. See how it impacts your focus, and also ask yourself the question whether those notifications are really essential to you in your day-to-day work and life. And of course, you can always turn back on the ones that are really important to you. 2. Check things less. Don't frequently check and recheck your email, your Facebook, your Twitter, or whatever it might be. If you're checking those things every single minute, then turning off notifications isn't really helping you that much. Tim Ferriss suggests checking your email twice a day. And more specifically, he suggests to check your email just before lunch and just before the end of your workday, before you go home. The reason for that is it's much easier to get into the flow state with a clearer mind. And in the morning, that's the time when you have a clearer mind. And in general, for most human beings, in the morning is when we're the most productive. But information consumption kills that. If you want to get into the flow state and be productive in the morning, you want to avoid reading your email, reading Twitter, reading your Facebook, reading the news, anything like that. When you do check your email, go through all of them and take care of each one. Reply to the ones that you need to reply to. Add things to a task list if that's what you need to do. The bottom line is you want to make sure you process each individual email properly, because that's what you need to do in order to once again clear your mind. Don't even open up your inbox if you're not prepared to do that. 3. Get rid of the noise. Work in a quiet environment if you can, or if you can't. I have in the past had really good success with earplugs that you can get from the supermarket. I would put on these earplugs and I would block out so much noise that people in the next cubicle trying to talk to me, I wouldn't be able to hear them at all. So if they really want to get my attention, they will literally have to walk over and tap me on my shoulder. So you can use that. Another choice is noise canceling headphones. Now let's talk about music playing. For the most part, I can't really listen to music and work at the same time. I'm a music enthusiast, and when I listen to music, my head is all in the music, and there's really no brain cells left for me to do anything else. So music and working doesn't really work for me. Now there are exceptions to that rule. Basically, whenever I'm doing something that's easy, tedious, and repetitive, I have a lot of brain cells sort of left over. So sometimes I actually look forward to that kind of task because I know I can actually enjoy some good music while also feeling productive. Now, Matt Mullenweg, the creator of WordPress, he actually uses this technique, which I have also heard a lot of people have success with, and that is to listen to the same song over and over again. Now, when you're listening to the same song over and over again, after a while, the song just kind of fades in the background and your brain is not so much engaged in it anymore. So you can use most of your brain for your work. Now, the benefit of this approach is, assuming you're listening to a song that you really enjoy, listening to it over and over again is going to give you a positive energy, which will be really beneficial to your work. And it will actually make you more productive. 4. Tab reduction. A few years ago, I wrote an article, link here, about the fact that most people have far too many applications and tabs open. Just like pop-up notifications, open tabs distract you from the task at hand. And therefore, they have to die. I issued a challenge to my readers in that article, and I will issue that challenge to you now. Never leave more than one browser tab or browser window open at any time. Only leave applications open that are relevant to your current task. When you're done with a task, close out any applications that you're no longer using. Try doing this for a minimum of 48 hours and see how it fits you. But here are some tips to help you smooth out the rough edges. If you're using any application that can restore their state, configure them to do so. Most of the advanced web applications of our time have the ability to restore back to their previous state when you open them. And their back button also works perfectly, so there's really no reason to have to leave them open all the time. If you need a reminder to return to something, instead of leaving a tab open, write it down in your to-do list. You can use a to-do list application if you want to, but I personally don't even bother. I just use a plain text file using my plain text editor, the same way I write my code. If you can afford to, stop using any application that's going to take a long time to start, or do not restore their previous state. So let's switch gears to internal distractions. Internal distractions are distractions caused by thoughts that you think up on your own. So how can you get rid of these? There's no off button. Now the bad news is that your brain has a mind of its own. To control what your brain is thinking at any given time is actually not that easy. The good news is that there are workarounds to this. You can actually leverage your brain's natural tendencies to trick it into doing what you want it to do. And also, there are ways to get better at taking control of your thoughts. So here are the strategies for controlling your internal distractions. We're gonna pick up at tip number 5. Save for later. If an idea pops into your head that is distracting, just write it down in your notebook or your to-do list. Doing this takes just a few seconds, and then put it away, and you're back to the task you are supposed to be working on. 6. Developing good habits. Although your brain has a mind of its own, it's also a creature of habit. If you can teach your brain to habitually do the things that you're supposed to do, your subconscious mind is going to take over at some point, and then doing the right thing will just feel natural and effortless. And once that happens, you will no longer feel the anxiousness of having to question whether or not you are doing what you ought to be doing. And then all of your mind is freed up to just do the work that you're supposed to do. There are various techniques for developing new habits. One of the best ways that I have found is to take an existing habit that you already have and add a new habit at the end of it. The goal to aim for is to be able to keep this up for 7 straight days, and usually it will stick. And a helpful tool for developing habits in this way is a website called tinyhabits.com. One personal example of mine is I knew that every single morning I drive my daughter to school. So I tacked on habits that I wanted to form at the end of that. So after dropping my daughter off at school, I would stop the car in the school parking lot and start my meditation routine. And then after my meditation routine, I would drive to the park and run there. And that starts my exercise routine. And in this way, I was able to form these habits. And after a while, meditating and working out just became second nature. And I didn't have to think about it anymore. 7. Prioritization. It's one thing to have developed the habits of working at the same place, the same time every single day, and for that to be second nature. But what task you ought to be working on at any given day or any given moment is still very much up to interpretation. And therefore, it could be a source of anxiety. Should I work on the website instead? What about blogging? The Getting Things Done, or GTD, productivity framework prescribes daily reviews and weekly reviews where you look through all of the tasks that are on your list and reprioritize them based on what you think are the most important things to get done at that particular time. The reason this is helpful is it allows you to worry about what things you ought to be doing just once at the beginning of your day, so that you don't have to worry about it anymore for the rest of the day. However, one pitfall that a lot of people fall into, and I myself have definitely experienced a lot of this, is cherry picking. Picking only the quick wins, easy to get an immediate impact tasks, to the avoidance of longer term, more effortful tasks that are equally, if not more important. So to combat this pitfall, there is this wonderful Tim Ferriss productivity hack, which goes like this. Write down 3 to 5 things that you're most anxious about. And then for each of those items, you ask 2 questions. 1, if this were the only thing that I achieved today, would I be satisfied with my day? And second, would completing this task make all the other items on the list easier or irrelevant? So that's a great way to prioritize while avoiding the pitfall of cherry picking. The best quote that I've ever heard about getting things done is by Charles Lowe, and it is this: the secret to getting things done is you gotta do shit you don't want to do. Right now, I personally use a slightly simpler version of that method, in which I just imagine for every single item, I imagine how happy I would be having already done that task. And then I would just go with the one that would make me the happiest. And finally, 8, meditation and mindfulness. Although meditation traditionally has been associated with the spiritual and the supernatural, research in recent years has actually shown that meditation can be helpful for humans. Meditation is a way to learn to be more aware of your thoughts, and consequently, a way to learn to gain more control over them. Now, you can never, I don't think, really 100% gain complete control over your mind, but you can get better at it. So one example is this. One night, I had a struggle in my mind. I knew that what I ought to be doing was work. But instead, my mind wanted to watch more Impractical Jokers. And it's a great show. I love it. But at that time, I ought to be working. Now, in the past, before I had started practicing meditation, I would have gone for the TV, no question. But this time, I did something different. I stood up, closed my eyes, took a few deep breaths, and I imagined how I would feel the next morning, having known that I had spent the time watching TV versus having spent my time doing work. And then after having done that, I chose to do work. So that is the power of mindfulness. It gave me the power to act according to my long-term interests while overriding my short-term interests. The question of the day for you is, what is the number one thing that distracts you the most? Thank you for watching.